Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider.
Welcome back to Successful Minds. I'm your host, Patty Baranowski-Schneider. Today, I'm joined by Tank Gunner, retired soldier, award-winning author, who's published a blog with 200 war stories and written and published 9 books beginning at the age of 76. So welcome, Tank. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm a retired soldier, as you said. Live in Dallas area. When I retired from the military, I began shopping for a job by the newspaper. That was before computers and all of that. And I answered an ad, a blind ad, and an international petroleum company called Caltex brought me on board. Caltex was 50% owned by Chevron and 50% owned by Texaco at the time, a $50 billion company. And my job was to coach and train executives and managers.
Wow.
I did that for 19 years until Caltex moved to Singapore. From there, I began teaching experience and beginning riders how to ride a motorcycle safely. Did that for 10 years. I taught 5,000 motorcycle riders to be safe on the street and the highway, and not one of my students were involved in a serious mishap.
Wow.
Retired after that, didn't have anything to do except listen to my wife, take work, do things around the house, and I began thinking about what to do next. And my step, go to doctor's appointments and shop for groceries. My son found the operation reports.
Nice. So, Tank, with a distinguished military career spanning 27 years, can you share one of the most pivotal moments that you experienced as a combat soldier that has stayed with you over the years? I'm sure there's many, but...
September 13 and September 14, 1969. I was a cavalry troop commander. Cavalry was ground troops, not air troops. And our mission was to bring some police to do checkpoints along the highway south of fire support base Buttons. And we did, and they checked buses and people on bicycles and cars and all of that for contraband and weapons and that. And we had a very calm day, and at the end of the day, I called everybody on the radio to wrap up and go home. And we started out, and a small bunch of bad guys opened fire on some of the scouts. And we returned fire and called in airstrikes and did the whole war thing. Eventually packed up and went back to the base and reported the action and all of that. And the battalion commander said, you need to go back out there and see what is going on. And we did, and we later learned why the large enemy force was in the area was to ambush a convoy coming up the next day, bringing supplies to the Vietnamese people in Song Bay and Phu Bien. Anyway, we walked into a horseshoe-shaped ambush. The fight was about 4 hours, and Sergeant Donald Sidney Schedule and Lieutenant Michael Herman and PSC Holiday were killed in the action. And Sergeant Schedule's heroic and bravery actions resulted in me writing his citation for the Medal of Honor. And it was bestowed on his family in 1972. And that was 2 events that have lived with me for all the time.
couldn't even imagine. I mean, God bless you all. I mean, I think it's just amazing. I mean, definitely it's hard because I've known younger people, like even nowadays, that weren't even in half of the things that you guys were in, that, this stays with them. This stuff doesn't just go away. So,
Well, I was able to meet his family, his mom and dad, later at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I was able to exchange Facebook notes with one of his daughters later on. And now I've received a Facebook note from a niece, a great niece, and she is interested in writing about Sergeant Schedule from the time that he was born until the time that he died. And I offered to help her construct and write that book. And we're still talking about it.
Nice. Yeah, let the memories live on. Might as well. Nice.
And Sergeant Schedule's story is in the War Stories.
That's all. The discovery of your combat operational reports by your son in 2009 sparked your journey into writing. So can you describe the emotions and the thoughts that you had when revisiting those reports after so many years?
The emotions were surprise that 40 years later you could find a document that was typed, written on a typewriter and signed. The other emotion was seeing a movie again with many of the characters that you served with. The 4 operation reports were August, September, October, and November. And it had many of the issues that we faced September 13th and 14th in those operation reports. And I had told my family, our sons, some of the things that had gone on during my tours in Vietnam. But I began thinking about clarifying and correcting and adding to all of these daily entries because I knew the rest of the story. I knew the why and the where. It's like Paul Harvey. I don't know if you know Paul Harvey, but he always used the term the rest of the story. And I knew the rest of the story, so I began the elaboration.
That's actually really good because it's hard to, as things are happening, it's like textbooks, you read about all the history after the fact because now you have all the facts. So as it's happening, you only have bits and pieces. So that's great that you can fill in that void and answer the whole thing. But I know from my own personal experience, having gone through some pretty bad stuff, reliving it again through reading and talking about it, I mean, it takes a while to get that backbone where you're okay with it. Because to relive a lot of the horror that you've experienced, I'm sure it wasn't easy. You were in it many years, so you must have a very big, thick backbone.
Exactly.
Now, War Stories of an Armed Savage. It's a monumental work with 200 nonfiction stories and 350 pictures, images, and graphics. So what was the process like for you to compile these stories, and how did you decide which ones to include?
I began with the most obvious and the most fresh as I read the daily entries. And I would go sit out on the patio, go shopping with my wife, and it would come to my mind different characters and different events for the daily entries. And so I began taking notes as they occurred, and then I would write the story. And as I was writing the story from one of the daily entries, something else came up. And so it just kind of blossomed. And some of the stories are about people that were not in that period of time in 1969 of the operation reports. They were in the other tour of 66 and 67. So I did a sort of a combination of my military service in Vietnam with many of the people that I had the honor to serve with.
Wow. Have you ever, I guess you still speak to some of them and share these stories. It's got to be like a good relief to be able to say, okay, we were there, we did that.
It is, release is a good word. Therapy sometimes is a good word with it. Heartbreak sometimes is a good word with it. Yeah.
Now, moving from the military reports to creative writing, it's quite a transition. So what inspired you to enroll in a college creative writing class, and how has this experience influenced your writing?
I didn't know what to do with all the stories that I had written. I had not done 200 at the time. I probably had 90 or 110 or so, but I didn't know what to do with them. And so I wasn't sure that what I was writing was readable. And I wanted to kind of have a history, to put in a 3-ring binder of all the stories. And so I think I got a brochure in the mail of Brookhaven College, which was a community college in Dallas. And so I enrolled in a creative writing class. And Captain Lee Sneath is the instructor. He's a certified sailboat captain, so we call him Captain. He's the instructor, and I think the second or third or fourth class, I had told everybody that I had all these stories, and he said, well, why don't you bring some? I brought 7, and I passed them out to my classmates and him, and they were kind of impressed with the stories, and he wasn't. He said my stories read like reports. And I kind of took offense to that because that's what I did. I wrote reports, but I meant to write stories. He said, stick with me and I'll help you write stories. And so in class, I asked the classmates, as I passed out the stories, did they know anything about the Vietnam War? And one of the classmates said yes. They watched MASH on TV all the time. And the instructor and I are of an age where we knew that wasn't the correct thing, but it was funny. So I stuck with him, and I began writing stories from the daily entries, my war stories, my reports, if you will, from his prompts. And I began writing fiction instead of the real deal. And the more I did it, the more I liked it, the more the classmates liked it. And one of the classmates said, well, why don't you write a book? And I said, I'll write a book. And the instructor said, well, why don't you put your stories in a blog? And I said, I don't know what a blog is. I don't know how to spell a blog. And so that was how naive I was about all of it.
I mean, it is like it is a skill. Like I'm one who can just, I don't talk much, but I put my heart and soul, everything in paper. But I write as if I'm talking to people, which isn't always the best approach because there is a technique to writing, which as you learn, like I haven't taken a class, but I know that's, when people read, they just feel like I'm standing in front of them talking, but it's not necessarily correct way to write, but you definitely have to take courses and really learn the technique. So good for you for doing that. Now tell us, under the pen name Tank Gunner, you've published 9 books since you first at age 76. So can you tell us about the themes or messages that you aim to convey through your books?
The message, I think, is entertainment. I write. I don't intend to write serious kinds of stuff, although what happens to my characters in my books is serious. It's about life. It's about love. With the pen name of Tank Gunner, people think that I'm a writer about war stuff, and I'm not. Although some of the backdrop is about war. For example, Palomino is about a small rural Texas town where 3 German prisoners of war come to live and work. The backdrop is World War II. They have been captured and are posted at Camp Naxi near Paris, Texas, and they are selected to come to live and work in my fictitious town of Palomino. It's not about the war. It's about them living among a group of people who are concerned about the war, are concerned about what's going on. And all of my books kind of follow that theme. I write about life, characters, but I don't write tank gunner kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you now how tank gunner came about. I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, Armor Center in school. My branch of the service was armor, cavalry, tanks. And I wrote a newspaper column, a satire, that was published in 24 Army newspapers for a couple of years. And being at Fort Knox, I used a byline of T gunner because everybody at Fort Knox would understand what T gunner was. And so when I began writing the stories in the creative writing class, I expanded T gunner to tank.
It's actually an awesome story. And it does tell a little bit about you as a person with history.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, you've done hundreds of book signings, including at Barnes & Noble. So do you have any memorable interactions from these signings that stand out to you?
I do. In the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I do book signings at half-price bookstores. I think there's 16 stores, and I worked 14 of the 16. The other two were too small to accommodate a book signing. I did Barnes & Noble in South Fort Worth before the pandemic, and then, of course, the pandemic put a kibosh on everything. But the memorable part of book signing for me is that many people who come in the bookstore are searching for companionship. And they come to my table to talk to me, to tell me their stories, and I listen. And that's the memorable part, is that people have confidence and trust to tell me their stories. And some I ask them to join the writing class to write their stories. Some do, and then several don't. So that's the thing that I liked about the book signing. Not the book signing itself, not the chore, but being with people.
That's nice. I mean, you're obviously touching people, emotionally, and it's nice that they have that connection that they want to, because I'm sure they don't just talk to any old person, but they feel comfortable enough to talk to you, which is nice. You're giving them that ear that they need.
Well, I think one of the attractions is my age. If I was a 30 or 40-year-old, it's hard to approach and say, I'm having this and that and all that. But with my age, I'm a grandfather to a lot of people. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Your grandfather people.
Scared, yeah. And it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. I mean, believe it or not, I do that with this podcast. I meet people around the world in every type of background, and I just love hearing everybody's stories. And I'm thinking, who can I put them in touch with? Because I'm learning so much from them. And if there's someone I can connect them to, I think that's great also. So it is true. I just love listening to people and hearing what they have to say.
Yeah.
Now, your commitment to encouraging, coaching, and mentoring individuals from teens to seniors to write, it's admirable. So what's one piece of advice that you consistently find yourself giving to aspiring writers?
Exactly. Yes. The big piece of advice is don't write alone. Join a writing group that you feel comfortable with. Mm-hmm. If you join a writing group, what you get is beta readers. They read what you write and they can react before you publish it. Mm-hmm. Get an instructor that is an editor. Uh, in my groups, I'm in three groups. In my groups, we do not use the word critique. We think critique is kind of offsetting. It is a good word, but we don't use it because people can get offended by, oh, I want to give you some feedback. I want to critique what you've done. We don't do that. We react. We suggest. We laugh. We cry. We fuss. And that's healthy. But the one piece of advice for teens and seniors is don't do it alone because you will stress out trying to fit any deadline that you set for yourself or someone else has set for you. You're trying to do it alone. You have no feedback, if you can use that word. So that's my suggestion. Find a good group that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, even with, even say with business, like years ago, like nowadays, everybody says get a mentor, someone who can guide you and give you advice and not look for something in return, which years ago, that wasn't a thing. So it is true. You can, everybody wants to do it alone because they feel like they've got this power, but you need other people to give you advice, give you feedback, help you because maybe you're thinking one thing and they could suggest and not tell you, but suggest another way. So that's great advice.
Yeah. I have classmates who ask me, why did you say that? Why did you write it that way? Why didn't you write it this way? And so that's helpful because it generates thoughts, and that's healthy. That's very healthy.
I mean, even from like a business standpoint, one thing we always usually tell people, I'm on a different type of business, IRP and marketing. We do perception studies because a company might think that what they're saying and doing is coming across this way. But when you hear from the public, that's not what they're saying. That's not what they're hearing. So that feedback can be valuable. And what like maybe you're telling a story and you're assuming they understand what you're talking about. And this is what and then they're like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. So now you know how to change it a little bit to get your point across that you wanted. So yeah, having a group and having feedback is really important.
Yeah. My instructor and my classmates also take offense when I overwrite. And writers need to be aware that we can do both. We can overwrite and we can underwrite. And when we overwrite, it bogs down the reader, and the reader will close the book because they don't want to read it anymore. So that's very helpful. Yeah.
I guess it's the same. If I get a book and it says 400 something pages, I'm like, I don't know if I have time to read all that. But to be honest, the funny part is you'll sit 3 hours to watch a movie because it's entertaining. If it's a book that's really got my attention, sometimes you don't even realize it, that you can't put the book down. You've already gone through 300 pages. So I guess it's a hit or miss on depending what's being talked about. Can you share a little about the content and impact of the free 35-minute PowerPoint show you offer about your experiences in writing?
I developed a PowerPoint show. It's a 35-minute PowerPoint show for the senior communities. I go to, I started at 12, and now I've kind of backed off. I did the PowerPoint show because it's easier for many of the seniors to see what is on the screen than to hear what I'm trying to say. And so I did it that way, and I developed the PowerPoint show to show my journey from the retired soldier, the operation reports, to the creative writing class, to the prompts, to the books. And then in the show, I give my audience prompts, and I ask them to think of a story, a 6-word story from my prompt. And my prompt can be something like, tell me in 6 words about your favorite dog. And so that generates the activity of the seniors to think and be involved in the show. And then we hear a lot of different kind of 6-word stories for sure. And then we have some of the seniors who use 8 or 9 words, and they get chastised by their other seniors that, wait a minute, you used 9 words instead of 6. You got to do that. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you said it, I'm thinking the same thing because I always go over and I'm thinking, wow, how would I even do that? And it is funny that you, not funny, but it's good that you do that because there's like another course where, for speaking, say for public speaking, and it'll put you up on, basically put you on the spot. And every time you say, you get points off. So you don't realize that these are just things that you do. So if you said 6 words, I would have to really think long and hard. How do I, pretty, funny, but that's not really, that's just giving you a description. It's not really so that's a good challenge.
and that reaction that you're doing now, I see among peers whenever I give the prompt and I tell them 6 words, and they do exactly what you did with their fingers as they're thinking of the words. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's so. Looking back on your journey from a combat soldier to a famous award-winning author, how do you think your experiences in combat have shaped your voice and stories as an author?
I think it's the way it structures the way I write. I'm not a writer that talks about the flowery hillside and the blue skies, the birds singing, and all of that going. As a soldier, our mission is to get it done. As a writer, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to tell the story, and I do it directly, as a soldier talks directly. So I may say 3 words in a sentence. I may say 1 word in a sentence where another writer would use a whole paragraph. And so that's sort of the way that I think about why and how I write.
Interesting. Now, as you work on your 10th book, can you give us a sneak peek into what readers can expect from the upcoming book?
Palomino is the fictitious town I mentioned earlier where German prisoners of war came into town to work in 1943. Palomino denouement takes place in 1968 during the Vietnam War, and I think it's going to open with a casket being taken off of a train, and one of the soldiers who has been killed in Vietnam is coming home to Palomino. And then the main character, Captain Grady Allen, appears in Rigors of Revenge when he's 70 years old as Colonel Grady Allen. And so now I'm bringing Grady Allen back into Palomino denouement. And the French word denouement means the end of the chapter, the end. And so this is the end of Palomino. And there's a lot of reasons that Palomino is dying along with the soldiers in Vietnam is because of change, grocery change, drugstore change, feed store change, other things that are taking place. And the meeting after the funeral is going to be in the local Dairy Queen, because in Texas, the Dairy Queen is the center of the community. People go to the Dairy Queen to visit and eat ice cream. And so Captain Grady Allen, after the funeral, comes into the Dairy Queen, and he grew up in Palomino when he was 8 to 12 years old. And he begins asking about some of the characters that have appeared in The Redeemer and Palomino, Porky Bacon, and Lucinda Jones. So Palomino denouement is the 5th book in the series and closes Palomino.
Very interesting. I like how you have the whole theme in it. It's almost like a movie sequel. It continues going. Nice.
And that's how life is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, anything else you want to talk about that you're working on that it didn't cover or anything?
No, I'm working on doing podcasts, and I really appreciate you having me on your show. I hope I've entertained you and your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I learn something new every day, and I just love the history.
Been a lot of fun.
Nice. Now, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about you?
The email. There's emails on the War Story blog, and there's an email on the Bookshelf blog. And so they can either write to tankgunner6six at yahoo.com or armedsavage6 at yahoo.com. And let me tell you about Armed Savage. That's kind of a neat name, isn't it?
It is.
Armed Savage was my radio call sign in Vietnam.
Wow.
And so I used that identification of the commander.
That's awesome.
So there's a backstory to all of it. So those two email addresses can get to me.
Awesome. You have a nice little legacy going on. What do your kids and your, grandkids and everybody think about all of this?
I think you asked me what everybody's going to think about all of this.
Yeah, your family.
My classmates are excited.
Your family.
My family is excited. Two of my family is standing off to the side, kind of,
nice.
Listening to what's going on. I'm going to post this on Facebook. I suspect that when you make it live, that I will have a link that I can share on Facebook and email to everybody. I have participated in two interviews in magazine, Dallas, DFW. I shared those links, and I'm almost famous because of all of it.
You're famous. I think that's awesome. That's good stuff. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Tank Gunner. So thanks for listening to Successful Minds with Patty B. Never miss an episode by subscribing. So thank you so much. I think you have an incredible story, and I'm super excited to read these.
Goodbye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Successful Minds with your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.